Well, let's start. My name is Dan Beck. I'm the director of LGRMS, and we're going to go through ACCG's property and liability, IRMA, their pool's over an overview of their losses for 2014 through 2016. Again, during this presentation, if you have any questions, you can definitely ask those during the presentation. But don't hesitate to write me an email at dbeck@lgrms.com if you have any questions. Again, lgrms.com. Let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. Again, we're going to talk about where the losses are, look at those in overview. But really the purpose of this training or this webinar is to identify trends in order to predict future losses. Once we have identified some of those trends, we really want to know, where that 80% of losses occur within 20% of the organization, so we can kind of focus in on there. Like you and many others, nobody has limited resources, and in order to have some impact in regards to long-term sustainable results, we need to focus in on those areas that have the biggest opportunity. Not only from a numbers, that 80%, but also things that we have the opportunity to control. So that would be things that if it was, let's say, a property damage claim that resulted from a weather issue, we're not going to necessarily be able to control the weather. We might be able to do something in the buildings to protect them, but ultimately speaking, we're not going to be able to control the weather. So we want to focus on things that we have the ability to control. Once we've identified those losses, then we're going to develop processes to control the predicted losses, and we'll talk about that. Again, you have the availability of your data. If you're looking for your property and loss data within ACCG, you can let me know and email me, and I'll send that to you. But depending how large your organization is, it's going to have an impact in regards to the sample size. So the pool as an overall, with the same risks that you have, is going to be a better predictor overall of what's going to happen in the future. You want to combine your losses and then the pool's losses to really identify where your potential losses will occur in the future. With that being said, I'm going to go to the next slide because this kind of tells the story. If you look at 2014 through 2016 by year, for that 3-year period, we had $56,000 of total incurred and almost 6,300 claims. So the $56 million of total incurred is a little bit deceiving in that more than likely that is going to develop over time. Whenever a claim is reported, the adjuster will make their best estimate of what that claim will actually cost. But when they gather new information, they will increase the value of that claim based on that information they receive. So for instance, let's say that an employee has reported a motor vehicle claim and someone was involved in that incident and they went to the emergency room and they were released. Well, you would anticipate that that would be a small dollar amount from a medical perspective. But let's say 6 months or a year later, they had to go through major back surgery and the adjuster learned about that. They'd have to adjust it. And again, that would cause the claim to dramatically increase regarding cost. And that's what we call development factors. And normally they're 2 to 3. So if you look at 2016, that's more than likely going to be somewhere between $28 million to $30+ million in regards to its eventual cost of those particular claims. Again, total incurred is reserved plus paid. So everything we paid on it, whether it's property damage or medical claims, and everything we anticipate, legal expenses, other things, that's what we would consider reserves. So we go back to the previous slide, we look at departments. It's really trying to identify those departments which have the biggest opportunity for claims. And if we look at the past 3 years, I categorize those kind of by the law enforcement group, sheriffs, jails, and police. You take those, about 39% of total incurreds. Then I group together roads and public works were basically the same thing. They're kind of combined together. People call them different things out in the field, but that's about 11% of total incurred. Then you have fire and EMS. That's about 11% or 10% of total incurred. And then you have parks, and they're about 5% of the total incurred. So if you add those groups together, you have about 66% of total incurred. Again, not necessarily the total 80%. A lot of those, I'm not sure those claims go. They're in miscellaneous claims, but they basically go within 66, and that's what we're going to be focusing on within this presentation. So if we look at the sheriff's office, where are the claims? What's causing those claims within the sheriff's office? Motor vehicle, again, has the biggest opportunity there. It's 62% of their total incurred costs. False arrest next at 8%, jails at 5%, excessive force, shootings / tasers, and flashbangs are, I would group all into one thing, as kind of a excessive force perspective. If you look at that, again, the most controllable things are those particular things. And we anticipate that excessive force type claims, shooting claims, taser claims, will eventually be bigger. And that's because of the climate that we have out from a national perspective. We've seen some major claims in regards to liability claims related to shooting and excessive force, and we anticipate that to be bigger. So that's something to look out to. But if you look at all those claims, you're looking at about 81% of total incurred. So what do we do about those? How do we control those? Well, there's a variety of different things that we can do. But if you look at the next slide, LGRMS services, things that we can assist you on, ultimately speaking, we can come in, provide training, and do a lot of different things. But you're not going to have long-term sustainable improvement in regards to risk reduction if you don't change the culture of an organization. And the only way to change a culture of an organization is to have leaders committed and to have employees engaged in the process. So what we've developed is what we call opportunity/targeted members. And what we're offering is, for those high incident locations, is problem-solving action planning training. We sit down with that group for about 4 to 5 hours. We provide them training on how to analyze incidents, how to really find out where their trends are, how to anticipate that, how to, once they've identified the trends, how do they develop action plans to address those? How do they get down to the root cause of those particular incidents? And then they develop action plans. And what this does, it not only has an action plan that they will have be able to work and ultimately reduce risk, but it builds ownership within the organization. It builds ownership within that department or office to ensure that they will. It's not our problem, not ACCG's, not LGRMS's, not your problem. It's the department's problem, and they have their solutions, so they own it. And that's the process that we'd like to support and recommend that people use. The focused audit protocols, again, we have focused audit protocols on motor vehicle operations, use of force, jails. We can look at your policies, or during that process, we'd look at your policies, we could look at your practices, look at videos, a variety of different things to ensure that you have all the best practices in use and you're doing what you say you're doing. It's a pretty in-depth audit. We have driver training. Again, historically, we've had 3 driving simulators that would focus on EVOC and pursuits. In 2017, we're really going to be focusing, using the simulators, on defensive driving issues. That's where we're seeing the most of our incidents, on rear-ending, hitting fixed objects, and things like that, people being distracted. So we have new training that we can provide there. We have a training or a backing train the trainer course, which, again, if you're interested, we can come out to your location. We can train a team that can train your folks out in the field. De-escalation training with simulators. So as we talked about before, excessive force, shootings, tasers are all claims that we anticipate going to be a bigger opportunity for us in the long term. So we need to have our officers be able to de-escalate situations that they're put in. And really the only way to do that is through being able to talk their way out of things. So we're going to develop a 3 to 4 hour training that would be a classroom training, and then have a simulator that they'd be able to utilize that training and show people that they have learned, practice what they've learned. This is also going to be a train-the-trainer process. We'll probably pilot that in several different departments, but provide that training and then provide that department, that training officer, with the simulator to provide that training. And then lastly on this, we have other training, high-risk critical task training. This is kind of a catch-all for all the things we see, whether it's false arrest, other related claims. We can provide training that covers all those things, and for officers and for leadership within your organization. EMS claims by cause. Again, there's a whole lot of claims here, but I feel motor vehicle claims are probably the biggest opportunity. Again, we're not going to be able to have an opportunity with property. We're not going to be able to, and officials is really decision-making things, making the wrong call, not going to be able to impact there. Human resources is pretty small comparably, but motor vehicle operation is the biggest opportunity here at almost $2.5 million over that 3-year period. 60% of total incurred. That's something we should be focusing on. And again, fire and EMS, the biggest opportunity we can do problem solving and action planning training. Same basic recommendation as we did with the sheriff's office. Driver training, the same basic recommendations through the simulator, through the defensive driving focus, the backing train the trainer course, EVOC, and pursuit. Roads by cause, again, this combines both roads and public works. You can see that road conditions have and they're, again, 36% of claims, but they only have 6% of costs. So I think we've done a pretty decent job of reducing those claims, although they still have the opportunity to be large in the future, so I think we should focus on those. Motor vehicle accidents, again, 37% of total incurred, of almost $2.2 million over that 3-year period of time. Heavy equipment, another opportunity, almost $1 million, 16% of total incurred. We see a lot of heavy equipment, road graders, backhoes, causing damage to property, causing damage to citizens and individuals. Those are large claims. And then PBE, which is public buildings and equipment. Heavy equipment is kind of a subset of this, but it's really general liability. So slips and falls on sidewalks, property or equipment that we use that's involved in an incident other than motor vehicles or things to that effect. LGRMS, again, services for roads and public works. We do have a focused audits on roads and conditions and process we can do for your location. We have training we can provide. That's a National Safety Council DDC, decision-based driving course. We have a backing training, the same thing we've offered for the sheriffs and the EMS folks. Again, we find that to be a pretty effective training. And then we have other training. We're doing some regional training on roads liability in 2017. Again, recommending sending your public works and your roads departments to that particular course. And then we're in the process of developing a heavy equipment training that will roll out later this year that really focuses on specific training for specific types of equipment, and that'll be available in a video format. The courts causes, I just slipped this slide in here to really show you this. Again, you're looking at about $11 million of total incurred within courts, 13% of that motor vehicles, and then 79% property. That property number is really from one claim. That was a courthouse fire that we occurred in 2014 of about $7 million. So from an impact there, that's not an area we're going to focus on. But parks and recreation by cause, again, property is big, number one cause there, probably not going to have a big impact. But we look at motor vehicle operations, about 16% of their total incurred. PBE, public buildings and equipment, about 10% of total incurred. And then pools, 26% of total incurred. Again, two major incidents, almost $1 million in claims related to pool things. So a big opportunity there. What we can do for you, again, is focused audits on playgrounds, parks, and pools. We can ensure you are meeting expectations from signage, making sure that we have the appropriate controls in place, and our field reps will do that. And then we also offer driver training, National Safety Council, DDC training, and then backing train the trainer. If we look at ACCG claims as a whole, all of ACCG's property and liability claims, again, motor vehicles the big opportunity at 37% of our total incurred. Property's next, law enforcement is next at 17%, PBE, general liability at 7%, HR at 3%, roads at 3%. So our biggest opportunities are in motor vehicles and law enforcement, maybe PBE, but if we're going to focus on one thing and one thing only, motor vehicle incidents are the key. And again, we look at the departments that motor vehicle claims are occurring in. Our sheriffs or our law enforcement group has about 57% of all motor vehicle related total incurred claims. So that's a big chunk. So that should be someplace we're focusing. EMS and fire have about 13%. Roads and public works have about 13%. You add those together, those three departments account for 83% of all the motor vehicle total incurred costs. In conclusion, again, I know I went through this quickly, but if you have any questions, you can call me or email me. We want you to review your losses, understand your trends. Again, if you're not a large member, if you don't have a lot of employees, your trends are going to be a little less reliable. Review the pool's losses, combine those together to really identify where you can predict where the next incidents are going to be. Once you've identified predictable loss trends that you can have an impact, again, if you have property losses, probably not going to have an impact on that, but if you have something you can have an impact on, that's what we want you to focus on. Work with the department leaders, the offices, and make sure that they know where these losses are occurring and get them committed. It's all about leadership, leadership, leadership. Until you can have change the culture, you're not going to have long-term sustainable impact on reduction of incidents. Motor vehicles, motor vehicles, motor vehicles. That's a big takeaway. Make sure that you have a sound process and sound expectations for motor vehicle operation in every part of your organization. And then ultimately, the only way to show that you are committed to a process is that you have an action plan. So based on your losses, your loss trends, this is what we're going to focus on. Once you've identified your focus, look at your policies and programs. Are those adequate? Do they need to be improved? We have all kinds of different best practice policies and programs to assist. Is your training, again, are you providing training on those policies? Do employees know what the expectations are? Do they know how to control these incidents? And then ultimately, accountability. If you are not holding people accountable for what the expectations are within your policies, you're never going to be successful in changing the culture. If I'm not being held accountable for something, my opinion is that my managers, my leaders don't feel it's important. Ultimately, this is kind of the presentation in a nutshell. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to give me a call or send me an email at dbeck@lgrms.com. Thank you very much and have a good day.